Well, good morning. Let me situate myself and then thank you for continuing to watch these videos. I appreciate it very much. We're coming to you from the mezzanine of the Wine Steward. I should call it the Wine Bar Mezzanine because normally when we're not using this space for a special event, public or private, it is the venue of a wine bar where once a week we change this. That's crazy. But we really want to represent as much as we can of what's down there. In other words, a whole lot of wine from all over the world, and how best to do that, and also how best to expose our own staff to what's new, how best to do that, but to change our menu absolutely every week. So on Monday, 2 days past, I created yet another menu, and before us we see the components of a red flight that is pretty damn cool. Before I tell you about that, however, let's just describe a couple of things that are over on the other side that you cannot witness visually, but let me bring before you a wine or two that is part of the so-called white flight, which is not always 100% white these days because, yes, it's rosé season, so we're including a rosé in that white flight. This is curiously called Remy Saves the Sea. This is the product of a winery called Bloodroot, also known as Rive, and this is just the project of the winemaker proprietor's daughter, Remy, who is very concerned about what's happening out in the ocean and wants to keep things as they are, or at least maintain, but hopefully improve the conditions of our oceans. And so Remy Saves the Sea. It does in fact donate some of its profits to ocean conservation. How about that? Importantly, just as importantly, it's delicious. And what is it made of? It's made of fruit that comes from Mendocino County. And what Mendocino County possesses that not too many other places in California have is a whole lot of the grape called Carignan. This happens to be 100% Carignan, a grape best known as coming from the Languedoc region of the south of France. It also exists in Priorat and other parts of eastern Spain, Catalonia. It resides on the island of Sardinia as well, where it's called Carignano. You gotta say it like that over there. And anyway, Carignan's a pretty cool grape for its dependability in a blend, but it's rarely isolated as a varietal. Here it is, a rosé varietal of Carignan. Bam. Or Carignan varietal of rosé. One way or the other, you get it. It's a very nice rosé, bone dry. It's new for us. We carried it last year, and it is back, the 2025 vintage. You can have a glass of it, or you can enjoy it as part of that quote-unquote white flight. What else is in the white flight is pretty cool, and it's also a geography and wine lesson. This wine from a producer called La Chablisienne is 100% not Chardonnay, from right next to Chablis. Yes, we're in northern Burgundy here, but we are witnessing the only region in Burgundy committed entirely to not Pinot or Chardonnay or Aligoté, but instead 100% Sauvignon Blanc happens here in a Saint-Brie. Saint-Brie, the name of a village within this region, and Saint-Brie must be 100% Sauvignon Blanc. It behaves quite a bit like Sancerre, which is about a 2 hours drive, a little bit south and west of this area here, Saint-Brie. Pretty cool to have a Sauvignon Blanc from Burgundy. It happens to be delicious besides being interesting. How about that? Saint-Brie by La Chablisienne. We now will tell you about, well, what shall we tell you about? Let's tell you about a wine that is back from our friends at Kermit Lynch. Kermit Lynch, who is that? What is that? Kermit Lynch is a what and a who. Kermit Lynch is a guy who has been importing for probably 50 years wines from France and now Italy as well. And this is an old favorite of ours from that importer, Kermit Lynch. And it is 100% Chardonnay from the Macon region. So yes, we're back to Burgundy, but instead of the extreme north, we're going to the extreme south to Macon for 100% no oak, I believe, Chardonnay, very delicate. The really cool thing about you people, yes, you people who kind of swore off of Chardonnay because maybe you OD'd on that oaky buttery stuff. Well, now you've come back with a little coaxing from us to Chardonnay by going to Burgundy, where the main white grape is, in fact, Chardonnay. But it's a very different kind of Chardonnay, growing in limestone, picked with less ripeness and treated with a little more delicacy in the winery. Often no oak, and if there's is oak, it's often a neutral wood or wood that's been barrels that have been used a few times, and so they're not conferring all these woody qualities to the wines. And they're just more delicate and pretty and refreshing instead of being plodding and overdone. Not to say every California Chardonnay is like that, but we know about those extremes, don't we? We've had those wines, and maybe it's time to try a white Burgundy as imported by Kermit Lynch. Very affordable. By the time your wine club discount kicks in, if you're one of our hundreds of wine club members, you know you're getting 10% off of your wines here. And this will get down to around $20. Pretty damn nice wine for a very, very decent price. White Burgundy. The producer is Perousset. I think I neglected to say that. Perousset Macon Village, as imported by the world famous and locally renowned Kermit Lynch. Let's tell you about one more wine before we get to what's going on here. This is offered only by the glass, but I think you'll want a glass of this once you have a sniff and a sip. This is very pretty, not overdone Pinot Noir from the Santa Rita Hills area of Santa Barbara County. This is called Spear Pinot Noir. And if you've had their Syrah, which we've carried a couple of vintages of so far, you'll understand this wine that just got here, this new Pinot Noir from them. Also has the same delicacy and evasivity. How about that for a word? Making it up. But it's wonderfully withdrawn. That's why you want a whole glass of it. It keeps you thirsty. It keeps you wanting more. It just kind of flirts instead of overwhelms. How about that? Spear Pinot Noir, very pretty stuff. Okay. These bottles are calling. What else is on our wine bar menu? Something that we have only rarely done. By Red Flight, consisting of not 5, but actually six wines. These labels might look different from each other in some instances, but they all have a couple of similarities. They all are made with Livermore Valley, that is local fruit, and they all emerged from one winery on March 27th, emerged from the bottling line, the bottling line at Madison Vineyards in the Livermore Valley. And if you've never heard of Madison, I am not surprised because they don't have a tasting room to visit. You probably could make an appointment with Jen and or Tony to see what's going on behind closed doors, kind of like the Wonka factory. You could gain admittance that way by politely making a call and a request. But in the meantime, you will find their wines here at the Wine Steward. That is how they represent their wines mostly, in good restaurants and a few wine shops like us. And these folks have become very, very good friends in the meantime. They live 1 mile away from where I do. And we share the passion for the idea of the Livermore Valley needing to grow a bit more Rhone varieties. Rhone varieties as originally, well, not truly originally, but as most famously coming from the Rhone Valley of the south of France. We're talking about Grenache, of course, and Syrah and Maubed and the like. So Tony and I are both very fervent in our nearly religious zeal about the Rhones from there, and the idea of being inspired by those to work with the grapes here. So what's going on here? We have wines that have the Madison Vineyard label, and we have 2 more curiously adorned bottles as well. One of which will look familiar to you longtime customers of the Wine Steward as our own baby. But let's start here. I determined this sequence. I think this is the way to do it, and this is the way to do it as well. What we have unusually is the idea that these wines, at least most of them, do best in a Bordeaux glass, not a New World Pinot Noir glass, where I usually will put a Rhone wine. I think they're better contained in this glass. They're better served a little bit cool, so our wine bar staff will do its best to provide you with a slightly cooler, cellar temperatured version of these wines. Here is the Grenache, the only wine that might be bereft of dark color, if you can see that. This is Grenache, nearly 100%. I think Tony will just tell you it's 100%, and it probably is. This comes from Tony's neighbor, Bill Johnson, right next door to Tony and Jen's property. in the Livermore Valley. This vineyard is right on Marina Avenue, if you know where that is, in South Livermore. This quote-unquote 100% Grenache is extremely fragrant. So the nose certainly makes up for the lower color that Grenache often shows. It's a thinner skinned grape. It doesn't provide a lot of color to its wine, but that's all right when you smell it. There are qualities of fig or date cake and maybe cherry pie going on here. Wonderful acidity. When you have a wine that's bigger, that's grown in a warm area, what can save it, what can keep it refreshing is good acidity, and that certainly happens in this very, very nice Grenache. What's coming next is, of course, our baby. I'm sure you will recognize it if you're a longtime customer of the Wine Steward. This is the latest, the newest, the debut of 2025 Domaine de Plus-de-Vie. And we are expressing our conviction about growing more Rhone by doing it ourselves. In fact, my backyard contributed nearly half of the fruit for this wine. Our friend Kent Sheldon, who now lives up in Sonoma, threw in about 100 pounds of his. We can still call this Livermore Valley because of the proportions. And it is a blend of Syrah coming from Tony's vineyard. And I have a little Syrah too, but it doesn't do so well. But I contribute, and so does Kent, a good amount of Grenache. And then my Carignan vines really kicked in this year, or last harvest. And so we have about 200 or so pounds of Carignan happening in here. And then a little bit of Maubed and a tiny bit of Muscat, of all things. 2 vines on the front porch grow Muscat grapes, and those go in just to add a little bit of fragrance. So yes, a white grape goes in, a la how Côte Rôtie in the Northern Rhone Valley often employs a little bit of Viognier, a white grape, for extra fragrance and maybe even color stability. Anyway, this is our new one. Syrah, Grenache, Carignan, Maubed, and Muscat. I'm loving it. It's a little fuller in body and definitely more colorful this year. Nice stuff. Still has good acidity. In fact, one of our wine bar customers was remarking on this having the most acidity of any of these wines, at least per his palate. And I said, well, we're hoping for that, in that we don't pick the Grenache grapes quite as ripe as Tony does, so that those nearly underripe grapes provide acidity to the nearly overripe Syrah and so on. So you've got some good balance going on here in Domaine de Plus-de-Vie, an all Livermore Valley product. We can say that in quotation marks, right, Kent? Here comes the next wine that I feel like works best. Here is another blend. This is a GMS from Tony and Jen's winery, Madison Vineyards. All of these, once again, were bottled on March 27th, and this is their debut. They're not selling these vintages anywhere else yet because they've got other vintages in the way of that, but we made a special request to have all of these wines that came off of the bottling line at one time. In that they're not all the same vintage, however. So what we have here is a 25, the youngest wine. All of the Madison Vineyards wines are 2024s, and then when we get to this curiously labeled wine, I'll describe what's going on there. But here we have this GMS that is nicknamed Dulcinea by Madison Vineyards. So instead of a GSM, GMS, because they happen in that order of proportion. Nice and crisp, very delicious. You can still get the Grenache that's happening in wine number 1, but you also get, here comes some other complexity because of those other 2 participants in there. Here is a wine called Plus, and what is that? This is a wine that Tony and I kind of came up with after a blending seminar. Tony actually made all of the components happening here. But we realized that 2 different vintages of his Syrah plus some of his Petit Syrah make a damn good blend that's kind of like the alter ego, probably a one-time only thing called Plus or Plus. You can say it either way, Plus or Plus. It's based on the idea that plus c'est plus, more is more, instead of being less is more. I think this wine's got a little more power and body based on being Syrah based than the Plus-de-Vie. And it's got a little more development because I think we're referencing 21 and 22 vintages of Syrah. So we've got a little more time on this wine. Even though it was just blended and bottled, it developed a little bit longer in barrel. So you get still got plenty of fruit, but you get a little more, I don't know, there's something like maturity, whatever that would be. Nice wine. I think you're going to enjoy having these as a pair at your next barbecue. What's coming next? The wine that you would think would come last, I'm putting second to the last. This is Tony and Jen's Madison Vineyard. Madison, by the way, is their daughter. Lovely woman, young woman, I should call her, attending Carondelet High School. Anyway, Madison is the namesake. Here is Petit Syrah that comes not from Tony and Jen's vineyard, nor from next door, but from a plot of old Petit Syrah vines as controlled and owned by Wente, I believe. So down Tesla Road a bit is the source here, just like 1 or 2 miles away from Madison Vineyards, and one of the best Livermore Valley Petit Syrahs I've had in a very, very long time. Wow. When you smell it, you know it's Petit Syrah. It's got that more rustic, rugged quality in the nose. Beautiful fruit. One of the challenges of making Petit Syrah is to tame the tannins. There's different ways of doing that, and they've definitely achieved that. It's definitely got the most tannins of any of these wines here in front of us because it's Petit Syrah, but it's extremely drinkable on its own. Would be even better with a ribeye off of the grill. How about that? Petit Syrah, man, can you see that color? It's a beauty. Finally. And here's where we are breaking with the idea of putting all of these wines into a Bordeaux glass by representing Tony's Syrah in this New World Pinot Noir glass. This is where this wine really shines. I tried these wines, all of them, in both shapes, and realized, yes, I want Bordeaux glasses for all of them except this. And that plays to how Syrah usually behaves for me. I love Syrah in this glass. Wow. Beautiful fragrance. If you had it in the Bordeaux glass, you wouldn't quite smell all of what's happening from this glass. Beautiful nose, beautiful nose. I would think Tony believes this to be his most important and best wine. I know he cherishes Syrah as a varietal, and that's the grape he grows the most of. It's also a grape that a lot of folks don't understand unless they've tried it. They're a little afraid of Syrah. They don't know what to expect. And that's in fact because of Syrah's aptitude for giving you difference from different locations, from different climates and soils and situations. And what you get is difference instead of sameness. And that's what a wine lover grows to love, but a perhaps casual consumer is a little afraid of. Maybe they want the same thing all the time until they realize there's much more fun in having difference all the time. But anyway, you do have some cool weather climate aspects in this wine, but when you have it in the mouth, you realize, oh, this comes from our warmer Livermore Valley because it does have beautiful body to it. I think a lot of the fruit and that fragrance of almost Northern Rhone comes from the fact that Tony's got a very good crusher destemmer that doesn't break hardly any of the berries. In other words, the grape itself remains intact once the stem is removed for a while, at least during the fermentation. And that gives you this beautiful pop of fruit in the nose. Beautiful wines here, a rare 6-wine flight, and I hope you'll come enjoy it. Enjoy the debut of Domaine de Plus-de-Vie as 2025. Try out our new wine called Plus or Plus. You can say plus if you want. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for all you do here. We hope to see you soon.